I chose to do my think aloud on Stone Fox by John Reynolds Gardner and illustrated by Marcia Sewall. I started off by looking at the title right here, Stone Fox, and automatically wanted to look at the picture. This isn't a really good picture that's in color or anything, so I wasn't sure if this was a dog or a fox, but it looks more like a dog to me, so I'm kind of synthesizing the information given by looking at the picture and the name and feeling a little bit confused because it is kind of hard to tell, but I can tell that there's a little boy there and he does look happy. So I am making predictions that this book is about has something to do with the little boy and the dog, but I really at this point am curious to know what is going to happen um, with the fox. So that is the way that I am synthesizing this information. On the second page, there are not any pictures. So I start by just looking right up here at the name of the chapter and it's called Grandfather. Well, that's new information to me because there isn't a picture of the grandfather on the front or anything, so I'm kind of taken off guard by that's how it is starting. So I'm predicting that this is obviously about a grandfather, and I'm making connections that, based on the picture on the front, that this is probably the grandfather of the little boy that is on the front of the picture, on the front page. When I look at this first section right here, it says one day grandfather wouldn't get out of bed. He just lay there and stared at the ceiling and looked sad. Um, I began by kind of synthesizing this information, and I'm curious to learn more information. Why is this man sad? Why is he just laying there staring at the ceiling? I want to know more. I want to know more. Um, I continue to read, and it says, at first, little Willie thought he was playing. Little Willie lived with his grandfather on a small potato farm in Wyoming. It was hard work living on a potato farm, but it was always a lot of fun, especially when grandfather liked playing. Like the time grandfather dressed up as a scarecrow out in the garden. It took little Willie an hour to catch on. Boy, did they laugh. Grandfather laughed so hard he cried. When I read this, it's telling me I'm kind of making connections that the grandfather is obviously a fun-loving, funny person. He seems to be happy a lot. He seems to be playing around a lot, and so it's very out of the ordinary that this man is sad. So I am thinking critically about what could possibly be making this man so sad. As I go on to the next page, it continues to give stories about Grandpa, and it gives a story about how Grandpa um, said, if you don't hurry up and get out here for breakfast, I'm gonna give your food to the chickens, and then he goes on and he does do that. And so it kind of shows that Grandpa's a joker, but he also has a little bit of seriousness to him. But right after that, it kind of switches up right around right here where it says that is until this morning. And so I kind of use the adjusting my reading pace. As I was reading the top paragraphs, I was kind of excited about Grandpa, his jokes and the funny things that he was doing, but then it kind of abruptly stopped and it kind of gets back on track to the point that Grandpa is laying in bed and he looks so sad. So I kind of had to adjust my reading pace there to kind of get back into the feel of what was actually taking place in the story. Um, when it when you get back into that paragraph towards the bottom, it says, um, there could only be one explanation. Grandfather was playing. It was another trick. Or was it? Well, then that has my curiosity going, was it another trick or not? I'm really not sure. So I'm kind of synthesizing the information that's given and I'm trying to visualize grandpa laying in bed and but he looks so sad and so I don't know if he's joking or not. Um up to the top of the next part is where we go back into, or where we learn about the dog. So it says a dog was sleeping on the front porch. Come on, Searchlight, little Willie cried out. The dog jumped to its feet, and together they ran off down the road. When I read that, I automatically inferred that the dog was a boy, because the name Searchlight, and just from the picture on the front, I don't know why, I just assumed that it was a boy. But this, when you read on, it says Searchlight was a big black dog. She had a white spot on her forehead the size of a silver dollar. She was an old dog, actually born on the same day as little Willie, which was over 10 years ago. So I found out that my inference was wrong. Um, it was actually a girl. And then actually I did the same thing when you read down a little bit further with Doc Smith. Um, it says, a mile down the road, they came to a small log cabin surrounded by tall trees. Doc Smith was sitting in a rocking chair under one of the trees reading a book. Doc Smith, little Willie called out. He was out of breath. Come quick! What seems to be the matter, Willie? The doctor asked, continuing to read. Doc Smith had snow white hair and wore a long black dress. Her skin was tan and her face was covered with wrinkles. Well, it wasn't until I got to that paragraph that I realized that Doc Smith was a woman. I'm not really sure. I guess it was just making connections that when you hear somebody called Doc, I guess I just generally would assume that that was being connected with a man, and the name Searchlight for the dog, it just kind of to me sounded like a boy name. Another thing that stood out to me was where it says Doc Smith had snow white hair and wore a long black dress. Her skin was tan and her face was covered with wrinkles. I was able to visualize exactly what Doc Smith looked like, and I no longer imagined her looking like a man, obviously. And then the same with Searchlight. Searchlight was a big black dog. She had a white spot on her forehead the size of a silver dollar. She was an old dog. So I was able to use visualization to picture these characters. Now, he has arrived at the doctor, and the doctor just kind of says, this is probably just another trick. So that I kind of am making connections. I'm using my metacognitive abilities to determine that she knows him. She knows his personality, as was kind of stated in some of the previous pages about he's kind of a jokester. He must be known about that. So she basically is like, he's probably just another trick, nothing to worry about. And, Willie's still really upset. So he's like, he's still in bed. And that really does not move the doctor. She says, uh, well, how late did you stay up? Well, we went to bed early, really, real early. No singing or playing music or anything. Doc Smith stopped reading. I feel like the way that that sentence is just written plain out in one row, it's not in a paragraph, it just says Doc Smith stopped reading. I am making the determination that that must be a pretty important statement. She was basically ignoring Willie before, but now she stopped reading, and that was just kind of put in its own little sentence. So I feel like you would be um, slowing down your pace of reading to realize that there's kind of a shift in what she's thinking. And she goes on to say, your grandfather went to bed without playing his harmonica. Um, the fact that she's asking that question tells us that it probably must be a really big deal and that she has concerns. So little Willie nodded. Doc Smith shut her book, stood up. Hitch up Rex for me, Willie, she said. I'll get my bag. I'm inferring that she is in a hurry. She is giving Willie a job while she's going to do another job. She wants to hurry up. Another thing that I found interesting with that is she says, hitch up Rex for me. Well, when I think about Rex, I think of Rex as a dog name, but I obviously don't think she's telling him to go hitch up a dog, but it did kind of draw a little bit of curiosity. But I find it really interesting that in the next paragraph it says Rex was Doc Smith's horse. They had to make sure to say that. Um, and then again, I use visualization. He was a handsome Palomino. Little Willie hitched Rex to the wagon and they rode back to Grandfather's farm. Searchlight ran ahead, leading the way and barking. Searchlight enjoyed a good run. Grandfather was just the same. He hadn't moved. So I'm kind of analyzing the text saying Grandpa has not moved at all. Nothing has changed. And um, the next paragraph says Searchlight put her big front paws on the bed and rested her head on Grandfather's chest. She licked his beard, which was full of tears. So I'm visualizing this happening, and I'm kind of drawing the connections that he still has beard tears in his beard. So that means he's still probably crying. So he's still very, very upset and sad about something. Doc Smith proceeded to examine Grandfather. She used about everything in her little black bag. Well, the fact that she used everything makes me think, use problem solving to say she's not figuring out what's wrong with him. So I am kind of using my own, I'm kind of synthesizing this information to say that she's not figuring it out, so she's getting another tool out. Well, that's not working. She's getting another tool out until she's used everything. And now Willie's kind of getting curious because then he says, well, what's that for? What are you doing now? He's wondering, why are you taking so many things out? I'm worried about my grandfather. On the next page, we are given a picture of the doctor and Searchlight and little Willie. And you can just kind of tell they're questioning. He's kind of looking at her, wondering what's going on, and the dog is very concerned, obviously. So I'm inferring that the dog and Willie are very concerned about what's going on with Grandpa. When you read the beginning, the doctor says, must you ask so many questions? Doc Smith said. Grandfather says it's good to ask questions. Doc Smith pulled a long silver object from the doctor's bag. What's that for? Little Willie asked. Hush! Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. When Doc Smith had finished her examination, she put everything back into her little black bag. Then she walked over to the window and looked out at the field of potatoes. So at first, she seems really irritated with him. I'm kind of just synthesizing this new information. She's telling him to just stop talking. She's trying to do her job. Let her do her job. She seems irritated with him. She appears like she just needs to concentrate on what she's doing. And then she goes over and kind of looks out the window and starts asking questions. How how's the crop this year? Grandfather says it's the best ever. Doc Smith rubbed her wrinkled face. Well, what's wrong with him? Little Willie asked. Do you owe anybody money? She asked. No, little Willie answered. What's wrong? Why won't you tell me what's wrong? Um, the fact that he's continuously asking questions is causing me to use critical thinking to figure out that he is pretty scared about what's going on and he just wants to know. And the fact that she's kind of looking out the window and rubbing her wrinkled face, she's trying to figure out what is wrong with him. And finally, on the last page, um, we find out that's just it. She said, there's nothing wrong with him. You mean he's not sick? Medically, he's as healthy as an ox. Could live to be 100 if he wanted. In order to kind of understand that, you have to use searching and drawing connections. If you don't know what that phrase, healthy as an ox or could live to be 100, what that meant, that'd be challenging to comprehend that. So I had to use drawing connections to hearing that statement in the past. I don't understand, little Willie said. Doc Smith took a deep breath and she begins and she goes on to talk about how uh he has given up his will to live. And when you look at the top, it says, Little Willie stared